Hello and welcome to the video. This is Hooves of Doom, and this video is about my Legion of Azgorh, formerly the Chaos Dwarf Army, um, however you pronounce Azgorh, whatever it is. I picked this army up earlier this year. I had it shipped from the UK, and it was actually Rob Syme's army. He's probably best known as kind of the honest wargamer, and he's a great channel and streaming platform that you should definitely check out. He had used this army in several tournaments in the UK, so lots of streams on Warhammer TV and stuff like this, and the Warhammer Twitch. So it has a kind of a famous army in some regard, and I think it's as I said, I picked it up earlier this year. And it's, we transitioned to the move, and I just figured now's a good time to make a full-fledged video about the collection and exactly it entails and kind of my plans for it. So this is, rather expensive army by even Games Workshop standards. It's entirely forge-rolled models. There's no Chinese knockoffs in here. It's 100% forge-rolled, and as I increasingly look at the forge-roll website, more and more kits are, being removed, including probably about half of the current Chaos Dwarf range is now no longer being sold. So, look, it is what it is. So this is an army that is entirely supported by Forge World. All the rules are through Forge World. It's still in the General's Handbook, though, not under Legends, so it has some life to it still. It is similar to the Death Corps of a Craig or the Elysian Drop Troops. Insofar, it's just not an army that you see that often. And I certainly never had any serious aspirations to pick this army up. As a kind of a comprehensive Warhammer collector, it was always on my radar, but it wasn't something that I put a lot of thought into. It would be something like an afterthought once I had exhausted several other collecting opportunities. And so it came as some of a surprise that I now own this rather large Chaos Dwarf army. And the army itself, it's still currently supported in AOS. It's not part of Warhammer Legends. But of course, the nature of the army and its rarity does mean that it is a ticking time bomb of sorts. And it will, probably fairly quickly not be supported. I'd be shocked if, 5 or 6 years from now, this is still an army that has the complete support of rules, continually updated in the General's Handbook, and the very fact that they're, removing kits would suggest that it's on its way out. But, that's okay. I have Bretonnians. I bought Tomb Kings and Wood Elves right before the Purge, like a month right before. And those armies still have a place of respect in my collection, even if they are not supported. And as somewhat of a kind of neo-stoic, I really do, as of all things in life, change is just kind of inevitable. And I don't expect any of the models that I own, even from the most current ranges, to be, viable for the absolute long term. Right? Every single model currently produced by Games Workshop does have some sort of a shelf life attached to it, and some are much longer than others, but they will all eventually be phased out. So it's just a matter of scale, and I'm perfectly fine with having a collection that has some historical importance and some uniqueness to it, even if it doesn't have some longevity. But that's, for the purposes of me playing games in my own basement, none of that matters. This is only when we consider competitive play at a tournament. And there are plenty of other options I have to bring to those events. So, altogether, this is a fairly sizable army. It's roughly about 198 models, a little under 5,600 points by my calculation. And that puts it at about the 6th largest army in my collection. I think it took Rob a little longer than expected to ship the army. And so he threw in some extras that were not advertised. He actually went down to CanCon, which is one of the big AOS events in Australia. And he used the money I gave him for the army to buy a couple new cameras, and so he was able to kind of cover that event the way he wanted to, which was, again, I have some mixed feelings about buying armies from people because my own personal regrets of selling armies are kind of starkly before me. But, at the very least, he reinvested the money into something that he loves doing, and it's still kind of hobby related. And if this video ever gets to Rob, and he ever has cold feet about this, I'm willing to have a conversation and potentially negotiate if he wanted to buy it back from me. It is what it is. So, I wasn't really sure what to expect from this army. I had every intention of flushing out a few areas that weren't well represented, such as bull, centaurs, but when the army arrived, it basically had everything I could possibly want. So Rob basically said that he was going to throw in some extra kits, and he did just that. I'm not sure if that was just overlooked when he advertised the army, but there are some fairly substantive additions to this army that were above and beyond what I actually agreed to pay for. So I think the only models I'm missing from the Chaos Dwarf range are Shartor the Executioner and the exclusive model from the Warhammer World store. To keep things consistent, I will probably rebase much of the army, according to my own kind of scheme. Rob's bases are really cool. They're kind of customized, but they're not universal. Not every model has that. And so to kind of standardize it, I'll probably use my own basing scheme. I will probably try to mimic his paint scheme that he did, because I don't fancy kind of repainting everything. It's just, a non-starter if that can be avoided. Now, thankfully, his paint scheme isn't too far from my Iron Golem that I did for Warcry. So I have a sense of, it might not be identical, but I have a good sense of the strategy I would employ to get something that is comparable. And so there's lots of repairs needed in this army. I'll warn you that right now. Some of that was probably through shipping the army across the Atlantic Ocean. But, I look forward to putting some time into this army over the next few years, painting a little bit, getting it kind of up to code, essentially. And all the parts, as far as I can tell, are there. There are a couple little units that might be more scratch-built by the end, kind of around the core pieces. But I have no doubt everything's workable. Everything is something that can be used here. And I'm really looking forward to throwing this down the table and surprising some opponents. So this is what the army is currently composed of. There is Drazhoth, no idea if that's how it's pronounced, but Drazhoth the Ashen, who's the main special character on kind of a large bull, a centaur, kind of a cool special character. There are at least 3 Demon Smith, perhaps 4. I need to go back through and kind of look at the model range again and just kind of compare what exactly I have. Now, in Rob's original advertisement, I think, the army was described as having probably, I want to say something like 70 to 80 infantry. And from my count, there's about 160. About 3 different commands, so it's a little short on command units, but that's a sizable chunk of Chaos Dwarf infantry. Just keep in mind that a unit of 10 of these is currently going for $70 on Forge World, so an extra 60 or 70 of these guys is not a small bonus on top of the army by any means. I wasn't expecting any bull centaurs at all, and it actually has 6 bull centaur renders and 2 of the characters. The characters may have been part of the original list, but definitely not the actual unit. That's pretty sizable. Again, those are kind of cool, like monstrous cavalry type units. I was toying with my mind, making lists for this army, and I saw those as being an interesting choice. Nothing here is really necessarily groundbreaking. This army does a lot of mortal wounds. It does a lot of ranged shooting. Oh, and I should mention that the infantry, it's broken down with about 100 or so are Infernal Guard with the fire glaives, so ranged attacks. There's some that don't have the weapons. I believe I have all those. They just need to be glued on. And then there's about 60 Iron Sworn, which are the kind of the melee dwarves. Again, a very sizable portion. And they all have abilities to kind of negate the first wound of every round on the unit, and I think it's hit rolls of 6 are mortal wounds, things like that. So they're pretty sizable chunks of ranged attacks. This army has 12 Fire Kadai, or Kadai Fireborn. I really did want some of these units. 12 seems rather excessive, but they're kind of, they look kind of fun. I believe they're the type of unit that can kind of explode damage when they're in combat, but they don't have a lot of rend. So they're just kind of the potential to put out a lot of wounds, but better against units that don't have armor. As appropriate for kind of a unit that uses a lot of fire. And so all these war engines have a crew, and I have a huge assortment of crew here that I need to distribute among all the war engines. I'll be looking at the Forge World pictures again to determine, how many crew are in each different type of war engine, and what their, there's a variety of different appearances here. How that's actually broken down between them is something I need to figure out. But there's plenty of crew members for all these war engines. And then this is kind of the bonkers piece here, because again, these things are not cheap, and there's a quantity here that I would not have expected or even necessarily purchased on my own had I gone forward. So there are 3 magma cannons that they shoot magma at the enemy. Again, lots of things to fix here, but all completely workable. There are 2 Dreadquake mortars. That kind of blows my mind. Simply because I in my wildest dreams, I would have imagined owning maybe one of these. To own 2 is just kind of crazy. I'm not sure if there are 2 of the kind of ogre loaders. I think there might just be the one. So I'll have to make do, or scratch build something, or I can probably bring like a regular ogre from Ogre Motrobs into this or something, and just kind of do a little conversion for it. But the basic hull is all there, the crew is all there, all the pieces are there. Again, this is kind of like a big siege piece that you put at the back of the table. I think it can shoot over units, and kind of cool. They're these are attachments onto basically like a train that would be moved along the tracks and kind of left at the battlefield. But very cool. I'm very happy to have these. And then there are 4 Death Shrieker rockets. These are kind of, again, I believe a unit that doesn't require line of sight. They can kind of shoot over. Very cool. And then there are about 4 Iron Demon. Now, I believe there are only 2 described when I bought the army. You can see here that there are basically like the main hull for 2, and then some other pieces. So, again, these might be like the main core of the Iron Demon, I think, is intact. I might have to kind of scratch build or convert one of them to make it kind of work. But in essence, I have 4 Iron Demon, which are kind of like a ranged, another ranged kind of direct line of sight unit. And then there's a Skull Cracker. Now, this is not assembled. I have no clue if I have all the parts necessary to assemble it. Forge World doesn't have numbers, right? It's just kind of a bag of parts. You have to look on the picture. I do have the instructions to put this together. I have all the core pieces, I believe, to put this together. And the Skull Cracker is kind of an especially rare unit because this went, out of print long before the rest of the army. I believe the story behind that is that the mold for this particular unit was broken. They during the manufacture process, they dropped it and it kind of broke. It's too expensive to replace, and so they just decided to just phase that unit out. And so these are very rare. You can buy Chinese knockoffs of these, but for the most part, an authentic Forge World Skullcrackers, quite rare. And this is a pure melee war engine, which is kind of cool. So it has all these like spikes and saws and giant picks that kind of rams into the enemy. And so that's it. This is, like I said, a cool army. I'm quite happy to have it as part of my collection. I want to thank Rob for shipping the army to me and negotiating the army. And I wish him the best, and I will definitely take care of this army and show it some utmost respect and have a good time with it. So kind of a prized possession in my collection. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next one.